will. Little did Christine know that would be his new claim to fame. Well, yeah. Thanks everybody for being here. This is just great. This is a great turnout, great energy. I second what Kathleen and Tom have said about being on the campaign trail and mail-in, that it is just, I feel an energy that I certainly did not feel in 2010, and I'm not even sure I felt it in 2008. But this is it's an amazing year. It's an amazing year to be in politics, and an amazing year to be part of your family. And I also want to second what they said, that we need to stick together. And this is about defeating Scott Walker. This is about defeating Terry Moulton. And this is about bringing values back to the state of Wisconsin. I also want to tell a quick little mistaken identity story. Like Malin said, earlier tonight I was talking to Ann Haywood, if you don't know her, sitting down here. And she said she was out dropping off lit, knocking on doors and giving people my literature. And a guy looked at the picture on the little piece on the card and said, "Is this you?" And I said, "Hey, that makes me feel pretty good." Thank you, Ann. Thanks to everybody who's already been out knocking on doors and making phone calls and dropping off pieces of literature. So my district, my Democratic family, has actually grown quite exponentially since 2010. The 23rd Senate District goes all the way from the outskirts of Menominee to the outskirts of Marshfield, and all the way from Neelsville up to Lake Holcomb. It's big, it's really big, and so I've been trying hard to make it around as much as I can to the entire district. And yesterday, I spent much of the day in far eastern Clark County. We had a wonderful, wonderful event last night in Neelsville with a lot of great people. In fact, some of them joined us from Clark County tonight, so thanks for being here. We saw a lot of new faces out there from what I understand. The event last night drew some new people, and there was a lot of excitement there too, so that made me feel really, really good. We started the morning out in Edgar, way on the eastern edge of Clark County. We were at a rural electric co-op meeting, and it was a great place to meet people, but it was also a great place to hear a great story about rural electrification. Now that sounds kind of boring, but what people went through, what farm families went through, what average people went through back in the 30s and the 40s to bring electricity to farms, when previously they didn't have it, and farm life was hard. They were, washing clothes by hand and milking cows in the dark and by the light of kerosene lanterns, and kids were studying just with the light of kerosene lanterns. And life was really hard. So the farmers got together and they said, we need a program, we need a national program to bring our lives to some semblance of livability. And so the federal government did this. And the coolest part about this whole presentation that we heard last night was how much they talked about the social justice issues of bringing electricity to rural America. And I think that's why Malin is here, that's why Tom Barrett is here, that's why Kathleen is here, that's why Chris is here, and Dana, and Jim. That's why we're all here, is because we believe in that social justice aspect of public service. And so those are the same fights we're fighting today, the fight for social justice and for human values. And it was also interesting, too, because they told about the propaganda campaigns that were run against the people who wanted to bring electricity to the farms. Believe it or not, there were special interests who didn't want electricity to come to rural America. But the farmers said, forget that, and they found all kinds of ways of bypassing that propaganda and the industry that was trying to block it. And I don't know which one of you said that we're running guerrilla warfare here, and that's exactly what we're going to do to win these elections. We have to get past the industry money, we have to go through, we have to go over, we have to go around, we have to go under, and we have to do it any way possible to win these races, as long as it's legal. We're not going to sing to the low Republicans and do anything illegal. So we are engaged in some pretty serious battles, and people are depending on us. And when people ask me, Kristen, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this now? There are days when it baffles me just as much as the rest of you, and just as much as my husband possibly, and just as much as my friends. And all I can say is that when I was a kid growing up on the farm, my brother and I used to climb these big tall pine trees. And we'd do it on a windy day, and we'd hang on to the top of the pine trees, and we'd sway in the wind and see how far we could sway. And we'd climb the silo that was ringed with just these little bands of rebar, and we'd climb straight up 50 feet to the top of the silo. And we ran on the barn roofs, and we rode horse bareback without bridles. And all I can say is that sometimes I think I'm still craving that adrenaline rush. And that's why I'm doing it. But that's not true. So we're doing it, all of us here who are public servants, locally, statewide, federally, we're doing it for reasons that come inside of us, because we care about our communities, we care about our neighbors. And we don't just say we care, we actually show that by the policies that we support and the laws that we try to pass. And we've seen exactly what the other side believes in by the atrocious laws that we've already heard about tonight, by the war on the poor, by the war on the frail and the sick, by the war on the children, by the war on the women, by the war on small business. The average money economy is where it's at, and that's what I'm going to be fighting for. I think we're starting to see what some of the media campaign against me is going to be. I think they're going to try to paint me as this wild-eyed, rebel, like Occupy Wall Street, because there was a letter to the editor today in the paper about me and being in Zuccotti Park, which I was back in October. I was there as a tourist with a girlfriend. And so I think that's what you're going to start seeing in the paper, is me as a wild-eyed protester. And you know what? Yeah. That's exactly. It'll give me the opportunity to say, you know what? You darn right. That's who I stand with. That is exactly who I stand with, the 99%. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about how Terry Moulton does not stand with those people. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about how Terry Moulton has sided with industry over the people in his backyard. So when that media campaign comes up and you hear your neighbors talking about it, you echo that. You say, you darn right, I know Kristen Dexter and I know where she stands. I know who she's going to fight for. And it's not the same people that Terry Moulton is fighting for. So we've got a big race coming up. I've got a big race coming up, and I was not at all certain I was going to do this. In fact, back in December and January, when I kind of figured out that the boundaries were going to be, with the old district, I started, relying on my close friends and family to kind of bouncing it around. And I called a friend of mine, and I said, I'm not sure. I'm kind of happy now. I'm out of the public eye, and I'm doing work that I believe in, work that's good, and work that's honest and hard. And I'm still working for the causes I was working for as a representative, but now without that, without the glare on you and without the scrutiny. And so I was talking to this friend of mine, and he said, Kristen, let me tell you a story about my own entrance, or about my own run in the last race I was in. And he said, a couple of years ago, I was trying to recruit an assembly candidate for the district I live in. And everything was going great until just before the deadline came, this candidate bowed out. So we recruited another one. And just before the deadline, this candidate couldn't do it. And I think he might have recruited yet one more. And in the end, there was nobody left to run for the seat but him. And he said, sometimes, Kristen, these races find you. Sometimes history finds you. And so it has. History has found us all. And so I want to introduce this friend who I relied on to help me decide to run this race. My friend Peter Barca has been at the forefront. He's been at the forefront of this fight that Wisconsin's been involved in the last year and a half. He's a leader, and he's the face of protest and action, and he's the face of resolve. He has been the face of utter exhaustion. I know, because I sometimes tune in on Wisconsin Eye, especially when they've been involved in 62-hour, 65-hour floor sessions. Chris, how does that feel? Not too great. He's the face of sleep deprivation. Not tonight, he looks great, I might add. He's the face of patriotism. And amazingly, through all of it, he's been a gentleman and a statesman. No one fights harder for clean, open, accountable government. No one fights harder on the front lines for justice, for upholding rules of law and order, the codes of conduct, and the ethics that define our democracy. No one fights harder for us than my good friend, Representative Peter Barca.
Desperately in Madison, and it's only 2 short months and she'll be returning, right?